Welcome to a special Halloween edition of the Wildcat Extra Roundtable. We'll be previewing Northwestern's Saturday game in Lincoln against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I'm here with Rohan, Nadkarni, and Alex Putterman. Rohan, let's start with you. The last 2 years, close games between Northwestern and Nebraska. Northwestern wins in Lincoln by 3 in 2011. Nebraska gets revenge, a 1-point win at Ryan Field in 2012. Are we going to see another close game on Saturday?
Absolutely. It's been fascinating to watch Northwestern and Nebraska ever since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. That first game in 2011 was an absolute classic. Northwestern, similar to this season, they were on a 5-game losing streak. They're going into Lincoln, and you're thinking, is this a lost season? And it was really that win that saved Northwestern season, got them to a bowl eligible status. If they didn't get that game, they weren't going to reach it. Nebraska was in the top 10 when it happened, and there are some key people still around. Kane Coulter actually played the entire second half of that game. Dan Persa got hurt, and he played really well in some pretty, intense action on the road. Last year, another very close game, similar to all of Northwestern's losses last season. They took a lead into the fourth quarter. They blew it on that last drive. Taylor Martinez pretty much just abused the secondary. He had a huge day on the ground and in the air, and especially on that last drive, whether it was picking at Van Hoos or Quinn Evans, made the way down the field. Nebraska ends up winning by 1. And I think the things that we should look over to carry over, I think Kane's going to have another good game. It's funny, people are saying, how could Kane have played so well if the offense scored only 10 points last week? I think he played pretty well, though. I think the real problem were the penalties. They happened at such inopportune times. Mike Trumpy had a fumble that kind of robbed some momentum on the first drive. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Kane plays. Looked like he got another injury in Iowa. He was limping to the podium after the game, but he's the kind of guy you can depend on. But I also think Taylor Martinez is going to have another big game if he's playing. Nebraska's had a little bit of a quarterback rotation since Martinez got hurt, so we'll see what happens. I think Nebraska can exploit the matchup with Northwestern's secondary. We'll get to the defense in a little bit, but whether it's Dwight White or Matt Harris starting across from Nick Van Hoos, that might be where Nebraska goes through the air.
Sure. You mentioned that injury bug. Alex, 3 running backs already ruled out for Saturday's game, as well as defensive end Dean Lowry. Do the Wildcats have any chance with sort of so many substitutes coming into the game?
Last week it really looked like Northwestern might be getting healthy. Coulter was back, defensive tackle Sean McEvely was back, and then the hits just started coming. Dean Lowry went out of that game. Like you said, he's out for this game. That's a big hit. That happens to be a position where Northwestern has some depth. Deontay Gibson will step in and should match some of Lowry's production, but you still hate to lose a starter. The running back position is really decimated. There's been a lot of back and forth between the running backs. Last week, Trayvon Green somewhat mysteriously just didn't play. Well, now several of those options are out. Obviously, Venric Mark continues to be out, and that continues to be a huge hit. The offense continues to miss that big play spark. But Mike Trumpy had a bad game last week, but for 4 years now, he's been a dependable power running back. He serves a role. Coach Fitzgerald clearly trusts him. And missing him, they'll be missing that power running element that they've had some degree of success with. It adds some sort of dynamic to the running game. Stephen Buckley is in. Green, as far as we know, is good to go. But the lack of depth at the running back position could definitely, one more injury and you're really down to bare bones one guy. Northwestern's already been hurt this season by injuries. Kane, as we mentioned, Venric, as we mentioned. Daniel Jones has been out since the first half of the first game, and Northwestern's been killed, like Rohan alluded to, on his side of the field. So injuries have been an enormous problem for Northwestern, and it looked a week ago like maybe they were getting better, and again, just more injuries kept coming. It never stops.
Just to add on to a couple of things Alex said, what I think is going to be really interesting, Stephen Buckley, he's kind of like a little Vendrick Mark light. Maybe he produces really well if he gets some more opportunities. Trayvon, Putterman mentioned how he kind of disappeared last game. We kind of thought maybe he's in the coach's doghouse for some reason. Turned out Trayvon Green was also nicked up during last week in practice, so we don't really know his health. He's not listed on the injury report. We don't know his health for this weekend's game. Another thing to look at was at some point during the game against Iowa in the first half, Matt Frazier came in at right guard for Ian Park. Fitz clearly not happy with the play of the offensive line, as he shouldn't be. They've struggled, except my boy Brendan Vitable, by the way. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe that sparks the running game, opens up some more holes. Maybe not.
Sure. You talked about the defense in last year's game earlier. Taylor Martinez, Kenny Bell torching that Northwestern secondary. But the defense has been pretty good the last 2 weeks. Last week they gave up the 10 early points, but really stiffened for most of the rest of the game. What's going to be the key on defense to shutting down the Cornhuskers offense?
Absolutely. I mean, you really can't blame Northwestern's defense for the last couple of losses. And for some reason, I'm kind of the holdout for that Wisconsin game, where I still think in the first half that game was going exactly how Northwestern needed it to go. The defense has been the lone bright spot the past couple of weeks, and it started really up front. I think we saw against Minnesota, unfortunately, they were able to get those big rushing yards at the end of the game when they needed them, but for the most part, the defense held up against a predominantly rushing offense. Then again, against Iowa last week, they were facing some big backs, Mark Weissman, and at the beginning of the game, you were thinking after that first drive, oh man, Northwestern's toast. But they gave up a touchdown in the first drive of the game, hold them out of the end zone for the rest of regulation, and they did a great job kind of suffocating the run. Fitting their gaps is kind of one of their buzz phrases, and they did a good job. They were really disciplined on inside runs and outside runs. So that's going to be the key to start off against Nebraska is, can you make them one-dimensional? Can you force Taylor Martinez to pass? Can you keep Taylor Martinez in the pocket, or whoever's playing at quarterback for them? Can't let the quarterback scramble and get those yards. And then ultimately it's going to come down to the secondary. Again, that quarterback position outside of Van Hoos has been in flux. A lot of coverage about Matt Harris so far this season. We have a story on Dwight White coming out tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Van Hoos himself, although is often regarded as the best cornerback on the team, he isn't a shutdown corner by any means. He's having a great year, but quarterbacks aren't afraid to throw to his side of the field. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, can they create turnovers again? That's something that's really been lacking from the defense, surprisingly, in the last couple of weeks, how well they've played. They haven't been getting those signature pick sixes or turnovers. So I think the key will be, maintain what you've been doing, but try to get those big plays back.
Early in the season, the team was relying on turnovers for stops, and they were even relying on turnovers for scores. They don't win the Cal game without Colin Ellis's 2 interception return touchdowns, which were basically floated into his arms, didn't take any sort of supreme athleticism or anything like that. So eventually that well dried up, as you could have imagined it would, because those types of balls thrown right at linebackers who have 30 clear yards to the end zone, that's not something you can count on to score week after week, which is a problem for the offense, and the fact that they're no longer getting the turnovers is a problem for the defense.
By the way, if we can look back at that Cal game if we really want to, boy, Northwestern's lucky to be at 4-4 right now.
Yeah.
Definitely. Alex, it seems like we're talking about this every week, but this season hasn't gone, I think, the way anyone hoped it would. Some people were thinking this Nebraska game would decide the division title. Instead, it's more like 2011 where the Cats roll into Lincoln and they need a win to maybe even get bowl eligible. What's gone wrong this season?
Well, coming into the season, everybody thought, we were good last year and most of the guys are coming back. Northwestern will be good again, and I think there were a few things that people weren't paying attention to, and we're all included in that. First of all, the schedule was much easier last year. We didn't have to play Ohio State. Nebraska came here, and that didn't result in a win. No Wisconsin game. All around, the Northwestern schedule last year just wasn't that tough. This year it's much harder, and you're seeing that week to week. Also, last year, Northwestern was one of the healthiest teams in the country. Well, that's another kind of lucky thing. For the most part, you can't control your health. So they were bound to suffer a few more injuries this year because every team's going to get beaten up. Well, it's turned out, as we talked about before, it swung totally the other way. And Northwestern's gone from one of the least injury-prone teams to a team that's really been hurt by the injuries. So I think the combination of playing a tougher schedule and having the health the health of last year catch up to the team this year has really deflated what could have been an excellent season. Also, there's been regression from players. Nobody would have, the last few weeks, Trevor Siemian, not even last week because he didn't play very much, but against Wisconsin and against Minnesota, Trevor Siemian was not good. Coming into the season, you would have never expected to see those types of days from him because he was solid last year in the role he was playing. You would have thought he would only get better. He hasn't gotten better, and the last couple weeks, you would argue he's gotten worse. So stuff like that, missing Venric Mark is a huge difference from last year. I would say those are the big things. The schedule, the injuries, and lack of performance from guys Wildcats fans were counting on has really dampened expectations and attitudes.
I think we're all guilty of it, actually, because, if you really look at last year, Northwestern really didn't beat any of the good teams on their schedule. They had a chance, at Penn State, at Michigan, at home against Lincoln, and we can talk all we want about how close they were, but they didn't finish those games, and that's looking, really prescient for what's happening this year.
Right, maybe we should have viewed it like last year was really the year. Yeah. Everything broke right last year. Instead of looking forward, maybe we should have realized that the time, the angels smiled upon us in many regards last year.
And quite frankly, even with Vendrick Mark, I think the expectations on him coming into this year were so high. Mm-hmm. Obviously that didn't contribute to his injuries or anything like that. It would have been great to see him on the field, but, I don't know if he would have been able to replicate that performance either.
Sure. All right, it is time for everyone's favorite part of the show, predictions. Rohan, the optimism wasn't rewarded last week. Alex predicted the Iowa victory correctly. Alex, we'll start with you. What do you see happening on the field in Lincoln on Saturday?
Well, last week I basically said Northwestern is going on the road against an above-average or a very good Big Ten team. I don't have confidence they're going to win. Well, here we are a week later. Northwestern's going on the road against a good Big Ten team. I don't have confidence they're going to win. Nebraska's problem is its defense. You can put up a lot of points on Nebraska unless you have an entirely stagnant offense, which is what Northwestern basically has now. With Simeon totally ineffective and Coulter playing most of the game, the big play option is totally not there. So Northwestern's trying to score by putting together these 14-play drives that, you need 5 first downs and all that. Well, how many first downs can you get? Eventually you need to break a 40-yard play and move the ball down the field. If they're not getting scores from defense and special teams, and they're not getting scores from big plays, you're asking a lot from Coulter, a lot from the running backs, a lot of yardage, first down after first down. So
Make the pick. I'm
going to pick Nebraska 24, Northwestern 14.
All right, Rohan. Last week you said the 3-game losing streak was coming to an end. The losing streak's now 4. You sticking with it?
Here's the thing. What's so sad about the Northwestern offense is you see glimpses, but that's because the entire offense has become, it's either, as Putterman mentioned, a 14-play drive with great running, timely throws, and they score a touchdown, or it's a 3-and-out. It's almost nothing in between at this point. And you know what? I've picked Northwestern every week at this point, and there's always some reason to pick them. I'm not going to do it this week because I'm hoping to give some kind of reverse mojo, and by picking against them, they'll win. So I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to say Nebraska 31, Northwestern 17, in hopes that Northwestern will win.
All right, we've got an American hero over here. They're both on the record picking Nebraska. We'll see if the Cats can pull the upset on Saturday. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to check out our coverage all weekend at dailynorthwestern.com, Wildcat Extra on Twitter, and then read our game recaps on Sunday. Thanks a lot for watching.